ज्योतिषामपि तज्ज्योतिः तमसः परमुच्यते ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं ज्ञानगम्यं हृदि सर्वस्य विष्ठितम्। किं गंगाम्बुनि बिम्बितेऽम्बरमणौ चण्डालवाटीपयः पूरेवान्तरमस्ति काञ्चनघटी मृत्कुम्भयोर्वाम्बरे प्रत्यग्वस्तुनि निस्तरङ्गसहजानन्दावबोधाम्बुधौ विप्रोऽयं श्वपचोऽयमित्यपि महान् कोऽयं विभेदभ्रमः। किं ज्योतिर्भानुमान् अहनिमे रात्रौ प्रदीपादिकं स्यादेवं रविदीपदर्शनविधौ किं ज्योतिराख्याहि मे चक्षुस्तस्य निमीलनादिसमये किं धीर्धियो दर्शने तत्राहमतो भवान् परमकं ज्योतिस्तदस्मि प्रभो। This evening we wish to throw light on light itself. Kim Jyotihi? What is light? Asks Sri Adi Shankara in a composition called Ekashloki. A whole lot of spiritual insights are packed in a single verse. Ekashloki. And that single verse embodies a dialogue. The teacher asks the student, "Tell me, what is light?" And the student says, "Well, during daytime, light comes from the sun, sunlight. And at night, various lamps." The teacher says, "That's wonderful. But when there is sunlight or light of various lamps, how do you see that there is sunlight? How do you see that there is a lamp?" The student says, all within a single verse, "Oh, that is through my eyes. So my eyes are the light." The teacher doesn't stop there. When you open your eyes and when you close your eyes, how does knowing take place? Light is where knowing takes place. In darkness we would not know. Light is when we know something. So taking light in that sense, the teacher persists. The student says, "Oh yes. Well, in knowing the opening and closing of my eyes, for me the source of knowledge is my mind. My mind knows my eyes are open, my eyes are closed." Oh, and what is the light in which you know your mind itself? Asks the teacher. The student is really made to think very deeply, or probably not think very deeply, even go behind thoughts. How do I know my thoughts? And he says, Tatra aham, I am the light, I know thoughts. To know objects there is sunlight or light of these lamps, but that is not enough. My eyes are what make me or help me know. Behind the eyes there is mind, and behind thoughts I am. And the teacher says, yes, you said it. Bhavan Paramakam Jyotihi. You are therefore the supreme light. You are, and you are aware. And as you are and you are aware, the mind, the eyes, and then with the help of these accessories, knowing takes place. The first and the foremost knowing principle is you yourself. You are the light of all lights. That's how Sri Krishna, pointing to the truth of our existence in the 13th chapter of the Gita, calls it Jyotishamapi Tajjyotihi, light of all lights. Last night we touched on work and cooperation, and we said all work and all talk of cooperation is not really meaningful unless we eliminate by noticing first and then eliminating the self-centeredness in us. We talked about noticing hidden motives. To notice these undercurrents of seeking power, pleasure, position, even while paying a tribute to somebody, there is on a deeper level in us a calculation. This is how I shall eventually be safe and secure, and I will be in the good books of all of them. Let me praise them. And so on. So, to notice these motives and undercurrents within us, a subtle awareness is required, and thus this evening we take up this issue of attention and awareness, how it can transform our living. Deep transformation is not through thought as it is through awareness. So, we shall try to throw light on these intricacies where the nature of awareness, the nature of attention will be clarified, and we shall labor to show that this awareness is not really a tool. Awareness or attention is not an instrument, it's not something that we can bring and then drop. Awareness or attention is not something with a beginning in time and ending in time. All else, including thoughts which are very subtle, have a beginning and an end. And we are not to conceive awareness as something in us, yet another faculty. We are very prone to categorize it also as another faculty, another ability, a hidden resource, or we have this jargon. Everything we would like to call as yet another resource. Like today we would call time as a resource. We have all this jargon in clever living, which you and I are into. We talk of various resources and classify them. Tangible resources, intangible resources, and all that. But alas, all that classification is an indulgence of this overgrown head of ours, and awareness is not within our head. Where is awareness then? The Vedanta would say, we are awareness. If we think awareness comes in and goes out, it is like saying we are extinct or absent or dead in between. Life is awareness. Yet, we shall show that there is some sense in talking about paying attention, failing to pay attention, etc. What is meant by that? In fact, paying attention is not really bringing something into play. It is undoing certain obstacles. The sun is always shining. I think it happened today. Clouds came in and went. We can't say that the sun wasn't there in between. Though in ordinary language we do say. Even I remarked to a friend of mine, the sun is playing hide and seek today. But was the sun doing anything at all? It was the clouds which were moving. In the same way, sometimes we do say, I was not attentive, I was attentive, I was aware, I was not aware. But more precisely, awareness is our very nature, and all this needs to be understood as how there took place identification with some thoughts. We as though descended, really it cannot happen, as though descended into thought and saw things from the screen of thoughts. So this evening we shall go into the nature of attention and awareness and try to appreciate how it can transform us. Life is a whole lot of relationships. From the cradle to the grave, life moves on in and through relationships. We are related to our own family members, neighbors, people at work, people in the society at large. We are related to plants, animals. That is life. And very notably, and therefore of practical importance, is our suffering typically, if not always, is in terms of relationships. If we have a sense all love us, we feel like being on top of the world. All love us. Sometimes it could be a mistake on our part. Jhoota bhi sahi. We would enjoy it. Does not matter. So a sense of all love me makes me feel very good, and sense of someone does not like me causes a jitter in me. And what do we do generally? There is an attempt on our part to usually react and take things in our hands and find a solution and do something about it and so on. Or some of us want to go to a corner, meditate, change ourselves. We got a model, we have a picture, I will change myself. On one hand, by an intense meditation, sitting in such and such corner, I will eliminate all my past hurt and pride, etc. On the other, I will come back to relationships, and thanks to this meditation I would be a mature person, and in that maturity there will be no more hurt, no more pride. I shall be moving through relationships without raga and dvesha, without likes and dislikes. And that is the message we get from a lot of scriptures, gurus, traditions and so on. However, as our own observation and our own understanding evolves, without blaming anyone, without blaming any scripture, we find, hey, there is a greater depth to even the scriptural statements. My personal understanding of scriptures today is the scriptures arrange and organize thoughts on different levels. Depending on our maturity, we get locked, face-locked loop or whatever you have, in some places. You get locked and you synchronize, or in physics you have another resonance. Your natural frequency and the frequency of a certain passage or mantra, the idea, the thought, match and you are there. However, the scriptures have much more to say. The very same scriptures which talk heavily in the language of punya and papa, right and wrong, dharma and adharma, also have portions where they talk of stillness, where they talk of no division. So there is an array of various ideas. I am very conscious that a lot of scriptural teachings where these divisions are there. Somebody of a lot of attachments, another person who is a bit more evolved, who has less attachments, which means more vairagya. Baddha, virakta, and then with even more of vairagya, dispassion. One is a mumukshu, one is yearning for liberation, and one then is free, etc. Portions of scriptures which talk about all these levels, vertically and horizontally, and talk about find out where you are, and then from there you start off, etc., are easy to understand, are very popular. However, knowing well the popular demand, I would all the same present some thoughts in a different way. For I feel that these thoughts can do wonders wherever you are. In fact, it applies to Vedanta anyhow. Swami Chinmayananji was opposed in the beginning by a lot of orthodoxy. Do not talk Vedanta. And he laughed. He said, Vedanta may not be understandable to many. Some understand it, others don't. Don't worry, the system itself will take care of it. He did not believe that it would cause various damages, but the orthodoxy was very afraid. In general, anything which is more precise comes under a storm. There is a debate on it. Should such precise thoughts be shared at all? Is it for public consumption at all? Is the pure truth for public consumption, or the public should be served only half truth? Has been a long debate. All right, without going into this digression of the very science of teaching, we come back to these relationships and self-transformation and the role of attention. One interesting shift that I would propose in this presentation is, let us not compartmentalize our becoming better in a corner and then dealing with situations in a better way, coming out of that corner. Rather, can we have, as in management you have the word on-the-job training. You have a year of training and then you go to the field. And as another option, you have reported just today at 10 a.m. a new recruit. And in some workplaces it's like that. Straight away you start off on-the-job training. Something similar could be thought of here also. Right in the midst of relationship, right when someone hurts us, not later on, not as a post-mortem exercise. Could we handle it? Could we be noticing not just the superficial layer of the hurt, but our mind in its entirety? I am hurt. What does it mean? He said something in the light of which it appears I am not at all competent. And I would like to be pictured as competent. I am attached to my image as a competent person, as a pious person, in terms of maybe some functional skills or in terms of moral fiber. In both there is a commonality. Whether you put me down saying, you have got a position of an assistant professor of mathematics, but you don't deserve to be even a lecturer in this institute. It's all through political string pulling that you arrived here. Everybody knows it, okay. Someone says, let us say. So my knowledge of mathematics, when I am an assistant professor of maths, is questioned and it hurts me. Or somewhere else it could be, as I said, character. You are very clever, very learned, very smart, everything. But you are, what is that? You have no moral scruples. Morally speaking, you are an unscrupulous fellow. Somebody says to any of us, let us say. So what is questioned there? What is shaken? My picture of myself as an upright person. and the mind springs into reactions. Well, I am not a Gandhi or Vivekananda, but I am better than him. How dare he say that? And so many reactions. And first of all, it is none of his business to make a comment. And so on. So many ways mind reacts, right, as we live. So as there are reactions, as there is the stimulus, and as many things happen, that is where attention and awareness can come into picture in a very significant way. And if we put what we should do with the situation as something to be done in another compartment. Now I am boiling, but I say, I shouldn't be getting angry, I shouldn't be getting agitated, but I am getting agitated. This evening I will chant Vishnu Sahasranama twice, and I shall also listen to that tape on emotional intelligence by so and so. In this way what happens? You lose an opportunity to get a first-hand understanding of who you are. You have certain sensitivities, certain sensibilities. You have certain what we call touchy areas. You have certain things which you hold very dear to yourself. You have your dreams. You have your aspirations. And it is quite a large mass of features. Who said that? I believe in some software, X calls something a bug. And Y calls it, no, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Yesterday they were joking. So it applies here too. Maybe my psyche has a bug, or call it a feature. Either way, there is something we need to understand. This may be rather challenging, this may be staggering, this may be rather hard for most people, and you may say, oh, this is exactly, Swamiji, what we are not ready for. At that time when we are hurt, when there are agitations, we just don't have any control over anything. So tell us something that we can do after we come home. After everything is done, after the important television programs are also watched, and then after seeing many channels and seeing there is nothing worthwhile, we would like to, before sleeping, do a 20 minutes. You yourself used to talk some 20 language in olden days. Now it looks like it has gone, that vocabulary has changed. That was so sweet. Tell us again, some 20 minutes thing to be done when we are dying ducks, no energy at all. Put some water into the eyes and maybe take a bit of hot tea and sit and pray, maybe for Swamiji's sake I will do this, and so on. Shiva Shiva. Why compartmentalize? And why judge ourselves as not really competent to understand our mind when it is shaking? To understand the engine when there are sparks, when there is noise. Go and open the hood, let the engine be on, and see, why is this peculiar sound coming today? Then you have a great chance of knowing the engine, and here in this theme, knowing the self. The self, the little self, the ego, the center of desire, fear, and therefore hurt and disappointment, elation and feeling good. This is a structure of thoughts. The tragedy in our living has been there is always some kind of urgency. Look at what we do even with our so-called earning a living. When we are in high school, parents also tell us, we too believe that first I must get into such and such course. Otherwise, I miss the boat now. This is a crucial year. This is a very critical year. Sometimes people having lot of language, need to be pitied. With that language, they make the picture, scenario even more scary than otherwise. And therefore, once I get into such and such career, course, then I will look at life as a whole. Now shut your eyes to everything else and just this, and so on. You get into it. I sometimes joke, which is not fully true, therefore I call it a joke. When I was in high school, everybody said, unless you become an engineer, there is no scope for you in life. And I ended up in an engineering college. Within second or third year, everybody said, there is no scope unless you go abroad or do a postgraduate. So again there was panic, and I ended up in some postgraduate program, as God would will it. There again they said, no, this is a mistake you made. You lost 2 years in this postgraduate program. And the only way to compensate for it is you have to go to United States. Then that heat was rather unbearable. That is when Swami Chinmayananji came to Madras. I just followed him. Because I didn't know what more they will say. In fact, that rest of the story you people know. You people came here, and then what people said, unless. Always there is, you do that and then you will live, you can relax and live properly. Till then, don't relax, focused. So, this problem of firefighting, there's always a fire you have to fight, and you cannot look at whole of life. There are so many apparently immediate needs. There's an immediate problem, and we need to have an immediate solution, and one after another. I would say, if not always, most of these immediate problem and immediate solution keep us in a superficial living. They prevent us from living in some amount of depth. And depth is possible by awareness. This propaganda, this is important, this is immediate, this is urgent, one last time, push yourself a little more, is by what is called thought, what is called thinking. We think and think and think, and the thinker in us is himself or herself a heavily conditioned entity. The thinker is not a pure, unbiased entity. It's a very conditioned entity. Therefore, my thinking differs from your thinking, my priorities differ from her priorities. How? Because the one who sets the priorities here, one who sets the priorities there, one who defines the priorities there, is a programmed entity. And we generally don't look at that programming. That shell is not pierced. We look outward. So can we go a bit slower? Not now in the lecture. In the lecture too it would help. I am sure many of you are asking, Swamiji, go a bit slower. Yes, it does help. But otherwise, I am saying in life too, can we go a bit slowly, not at the cost of efficiency or not, I don't mean go a bit slowly and drag on in an inefficient manner. No. Can we go a bit slowly about life so that we can understand an activity when it is taking place, not later on. Don't do an introspection at night 11:30, how I lived the day, how my day was. Introspection as you are acting. Right now, for example, are you fully aware why you are here? And am I fully aware why I am giving all these talks? I perhaps cannot say about you, I have no right to say about you, but about me, I honestly say, I don't know really why I am giving all these talks. I know superficially. People felt and they're good and they asked me to give more talks and I enjoy it and etc. That is not the whole thing. In fact, I have noticed that to equate spirituality with giving lectures, talking, conducting some group activity is not very acceptable. But in the world, typically it is equated. I believe you are spiritual. How many books have you written? I believe you are a very spiritually advanced person. How many followers do you have? How many people attend your classes in a week? Like this the mind goes. There is some false equation. Really speaking, look at spirituality. Let us all do it in its essential nature. Whatever you are, whatever work you may be doing, to go about the day's activities with awareness is the hallmark of spirituality. In that awareness, there is becoming a whole. When we are not aware, when we identify with an image and protect it, guard it, and seek to enhance it even better, I pat myself saying, in my family, I have educated myself the most. No one did it up to this point, and I have managed to be an assistant professor of mathematics in this reputed college at such and such place. On one hand, I am proud. On the other, my eyes are set on something else. Now, there is this guarding. Why do I guard? Why do I day after day after day guard a certain picture? If I ask, then, without giving more and more examples, I would say, in asking fundamental questions, you will be required to change the very approach from thought being a problem solver to attention being the problem solver. Awareness. Because you find thought, that is thinking, where there is a thinker, has questionable credentials. That's how Ramana Maharshi, with regard to who am I inquiry, which is no different from what we are talking, very often gave the example of a certain thief who wore policeman's dress and went about the whole town looking for thief. Where is the thief? Where is the thief? He himself is the thief. The thief turned policeman. In the same way, I am asking, where is truth? Where is truth? Or to be more precise, I am asking, how do I end sorrow? How do I put an end to jealousy? How do I put an end to my incompleteness? But who is this I? This I who is seeking to put an end is taken for granted. All of us take the sense of I for granted, and therefore we say, unless there is awareness right when we are acting, when we are doing, somebody says something, an action on our part, a stimulus from others, then a response or a reaction to that stimulus from our part. There are several components. And as all these are happening, if we are aware, it would be a very different approach to appreciate how this different approach could be very potent, very significant. I need to show once more the limitation of thought as an approach. Take, for example, I wear, let us say, a special dress with a special badge, maybe a special hat, and walk into a gathering. And I thought everybody would take note of it. And some do. 3 or 4 people ask, hey, that's a wonderful hat. This is a wonderful badge you have and something. I feel good about it. But surprisingly, many others are not noticing it. Now there are 2 things here. One is there is a self-consciousness, and I could think about it. How come all are not taking note of my special attire, special dress for the evening and so on, and analyzing. Yeah, those people always were like that. They are lost in their own world and so on. So many things. I am just offhand giving examples. Analyzing. But do you know, the second thing I would like to touch on is, in this whole process, I could pay attention to my seeking that attention. And if I notice that, I am seeking attention. Up here, the eye has risen, saying, see my hat and see my badge and so on. I notice it. Now in this noticing, please ask yourself, is this noticing also another thought? In fact, pure noticing is not a thought. Thought has words, thought has images, thought has pictures, thought has boundaries. Whereas pure noticing, in fact, is free from thought. Now, the wonder of wonders happens when I intensely notice that, I am seeking attention because I wore a new hat. In my noticing, a whole lot of thoughts, why he took note of it and why she did not take note of it, etc., they all subside. And in the process, self-consciousness itself subsides. You know what is self-consciousness? Whether it is a good dress, or suppose I have a scar on my face. I tried to hide it with the latest cosmetics, a thick layer of it, but still it didn't go. And to put one whole lot will be very awkward. So I stopped at some point. The whole 100 people may not be really concerned. Or 1 or 2 watch, they don't make an issue also. But I am very conscious. My mind, as though 90% of my energy is, are they noticing this scar? Are they noticing this scar? This is self-consciousness. Don't we say about some people, oh, they have an air about them. Always, they think they are special people. We can feel that. And then we say about another friend of ours, say, oh, that person, what we like about her is, she is so unassuming. Looking at all her achievements, anyone would have been full of pride. But she is unassuming. She is the same person whom we used to see in those good old days. That's so wonderful about her, don't we say? Now, the person who has the air about her or him has this self-consciousness. I am so and so. That is the thought. Now, the second person, as you all know this case, second person who is unassuming, I would say, for a simple appreciation of what we are talking tonight, second person is living in attention. The second person is able to see, suppose you show him something, he sees it. And as he sees it, there are no thoughts in him about who he is. Please see the positions of attention and thoughts about oneself towards each other. If I am seeing something with all attention, there are no thoughts in me about who I am. And at the other extreme, if I have a lot of thoughts about who I am, and I'm thinking about, do they all know who I am? I should let them know who I am. Like that, there are a lot of thoughts about who I am, then I won't see even the simplest thing before me. Of course, we are all very clever people. Some basic things we see. Yeah, that is very nice. Oh, a lot of routine compliments or comments we make. But we know there is a shallowness about it. To listen to a song when there are no thoughts about yourself. In a lot of traditional teaching, I must admit, this kind of being free from ego, being free from self-consciousness, being free from thoughts of who I am and in a favorable or unfavorable sense, is connected to some kind of mystical experience and out of the way, like I myself have shared with great pleasure the illustrative example of Sri Ramakrishna. He was going in a horse-driven cart in the busy street of Kolkata, and suddenly he stood up. Of course, I have all value and regard for that example, but I am trying to say that that need not be the only way. That is the difference. Now, what happens with Sri Ramakrishna is, he stands up and says, Ma, or dhoti gets a bit loose. He had not tied it properly. It is coming down. Now, his friends or disciples or whoever, they say to him, Thakurji, they used to call him Thakur. Thakurji, your dhoti is slipping. But he is just Ma, Durge, Ambe or something he is saying. And they hold the dhoti in place. And the tanga, the horse-driven cart is going on, carriage is moving ahead. But after some time, this is supposed to be a real story of Sri Ramakrishna. He comes back to normal consciousness, and then, what, you were all saying something, I didn't hear properly. They say, yes, your dhoti was slipping, we held it, otherwise it would have been a bit embarrassing situation. If not for you, for us, our guru's dhoti fell, and therefore our image in the society will be, tomorrow they will ask, are you the disciple of that man whose dhoti fell other day? So, see, we are very concerned with our image, whose disciple we are, and this is life. So they said, and then the reply that Sri Ramakrishna gave is very inspiring. He said, oh, you people were wondering, my dhoti was falling, and I was wondering at that time my body was falling away somewhere. He was having some kind of out-of-body experience. Leave alone consciousness of the dhoti, he was not conscious of his body. And it's certainly very inspiring, and there is much to learn from it. But I would say that if we compartmentalize spiritual maturity to losing body consciousness and to some ecstasy at the name of Lord, and say that alone there is terrible injustice to the essential teaching. What we need to learn from that example too is the common denominator to all excellent ways of living, and that is the absence of concern about one's image. But it need not be through a forgetfulness, but it could be through great attention. Imagine, one of you is going with the dhoti and the dhoti is slipping, and you watch your mind. Watch the embarrassment that is about to rise. And in intense watching, you say, well, I have no secret to hide. What they will see will be perfectly in accordance with books of biology and anatomy. Okay, let me see. And in intense seeing, you could be free from embarrassment. There is a certain spiritual maturity there in being free from inhibitions. Not that you should do it, but I am throwing light on the You could do it also, no objection. You could see the conditionings in your mind, to understand the conditioning in your mind. So, look at this. All of us have this self-consciousness. We speakers have it, a certain worry. What if I forget all my ideas? Whereas, whether it is a speaker or a writer or in all your professions, you have some guests at home and you are serving. I remember in Bombay, a certain lady was serving Swami Chinmayanandaji, and her hands were trembling, and Swamiji said, "You think I will not only eat this food but eat you also?" No, Swamiji, but no, Swamiji, nothing. But her hands were trembling because she was really overawed, and she was perhaps very self-conscious at that time. Swami Chinmayanandaji, the world-renowned Vedantic master, has come to my home, and I don't know any ways how to receive a Mahatma and all that, and so on. Therefore, she was nervous. This nervousness, stage fear, varieties of, in so many ways. This self-consciousness, in the light of tonight's theme, is created by thinking. Whether you notice the thinking at that time or not, but there is thinking. Thinking can sometimes be non-verbal. There may not be English or Hindi, Kannada or Gujarati words at that time. No language. But there is a subtle thought. Will someone judge me unfavorably? I hope people will judge the way I am doing something as well done. If there is this comment, well done, how wonderful it is. If the comment is going to be, what a laughing stock, how terrible it is. So without words, there is thought, the machine of thought working at that time, and therefore there is nervousness. If one is totally attentive, one sees here is a bowl which has the Gujarati preparation, doklas, let us say. One sees the plate, one sees the bowl, one sees the spoon or the, with which you hold. Okay. Some places I don't get common words. I have big philosophy words ready. This is my conditioning. I would know Brahman and Atman, but I would not know some, Anyway, so, excuse me, I'll just use the word spoon. With a spoon I am lifting. What is reality? Not Brahman, not Atman. At that time the reality is the dokla, the spoon, and Swami Chinmayanandaji's plate. I put it there. A quiet mind, a still mind. No thought, especially, to be more specific, no thought about one's image. That would be an unassuming, simple mind. It is said when sage Vyasa came to the palace in Hastinapura, he was a great sage, but apparently he was not very good looking. He was tall, dark, and with some big beard, and bit old also, and little terrifying. In Mahabharata they show. The two queens, Ambika and Ambalika, were very nervous. Ambika closed her eyes as he embraced her, and with his spiritual powers he made her conceive, and that is how Dhritarashtra was born. And Mahabharata story is very interesting. Dhritarashtra was born blind because the mother closed her eyes while taking that spiritual power in her. And then Ambalika, she did not close her eyes, but she too was so nervous, and I believe she sort of as though got bleached, and therefore son was born all white, Pandu. And it was a servant maid who was very unassuming, simple, who saw that this was a Mahatma. Will you bless me also with a son? She asked, the servant maid in the palace of Hastinapura. and he looks at her. As per the TV version, he sends a certain beam of power. Whether there was a physical union or it was a hug and some mantra power, we don't know. Those are not important in this theme. That might be another topic for some other discussion. So this woman, the servant woman in the palace, had a simple mind, very factual, no fancy, no aham vritti, no I thoughts in some bizarre way. And she too conceived. And her son, neither blind nor bleached, her son was a very wise man, Vidura. Very, very wise. Vidura Niti in Mahabharata is a portion. Today you have management lessons from Vidura Niti. People going around, in India now there is a wave. Even IIMs, etc. are trying to introduce Indian ethos in management. And there are people who go and quote a little from Mahabharata, Ramayana, and then say, well, Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker, has had nothing new. Vidura had said the same thing. And everybody, is that so? I don't know how far it is really worked out, but surely there is some truth in it. We are always very smart in saying, this is nothing. What Einstein said had been said by someone in some Kaushitaki Upanishad or something we say. Hearing that word, people are shaken. Is that so? Good. Well, no comments on that, true or false. So, now coming from the story to the theme proper, what is self-consciousness and what is the interference of image consciousness and what is the good that comes of thinking and thinking about the image? If I say, I shouldn't be having this image consciousness, I shouldn't be nervous, that is again another thought. In fact, when you say I shouldn't be nervous, that means you are very concerned about the whole thing, more concerned than otherwise. And if you say, no, I think I will not think about it at all, to decide I will not think is also again in the field of thought. So then what is awareness? You and I become aware to some extent that, I am caught in some thoughts rolling out in a mechanical way, and yes, the diagnosis is right. What am I to do? This much we appreciate. But then comes the query, should I ask what am I to do? Or why not see that this what am I to do is again another mechanical thought. What am I to do? How are we to handle? So if we, perhaps it is looking a bit abstract, let me put it in simple terms. If we notice that we are trying to overcome mechanicalness by tools which are also mechanical. We are trying to catch the thief with the help of the thief only. It won't work. So could we be aware how our very tools are questionable? Our tools are of questionable credentials. And in that, seeing its limitation, in seeing that thoughts cannot handle thoughts, you have to see it, not just to repeat statement. I read that thought cannot solve thought, therefore I should not think. Then there is no direct seeing. Then it is like you see someone in police dress and you believe he is a real policeman, but a thought passes through your mind. Somebody said he is not policeman. Somebody said he is a thief. But I think he is a real good policeman. So if you believe he is a policeman, just one thought that somebody said he is thief will not help you. So if we see, there can be a tremendous change. I talked of superficiality, I talked of immediate problems and immediate solutions, and they seem to never end. And in contrast, you have the long-term vision of life, long-term understanding of life. You will have a long-term or a holistic, a thorough understanding of life, never through thought. No wonder even a statement of Edison, in a sense, comes close to it. Thomas Edison, did he say all discoveries are 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration? Thought is in the realm of perspiration, but then inspiration is an intuition, and here through thought, through some thinking, through some honest thinking, we see the limitation of thinking, and then we stay still. In that stillness, whatever has to happen will happen. This food, shelter and clothes, roti, kapada or makan, as the expression goes, is a certain immediate need of ours. But you know how thought has made it so complicated? Roti, food not for just today, for tomorrow, for days to come, for our children, for our grandchildren. I know many seekers, spiritual seekers, who have said to me, we are going to put a large enough fixed deposit, FD, and then have a little cottage in Rishikesh. That interest should be able to, with the pillow of the FD in State Bank of India, let us say somewhere in Madras or in Bombay, I will sit in Rishikesh and listen. Now, all of us do it, who doesn't? But can we see that there is a contradiction there in the thinking, not in the actual doing, but in that psychological dependence? Please see the distinction. Actually, you must do. In fact, I have prevented many people from donating all their land to ashrams and so on. Don't do it, To my own ashram. There was one lady in Pune who wanted to donate 40 acres of her land to Chinmaya Mission when I was in Chinmaya Mission. But I said to her, because I saw that she was quite an emotional person. I said, what, next year suppose your mind changes? And believe me, next year she was sent away from the mission on some grounds. She was dismissed, thrown out. And if she had given her land and this and that, you can imagine she would have been in deep trouble. Then she went on. So I am not talking of the physical aspect of it. But as you do whatever you do, some feel comfortable when there is $1 million in the bank, some feel comfortable when there is 100,000 in the bank. Fine, that is not our area here in this talk. Can you notice the mind again and again saying, I have the FD, Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Should be enough. Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Like that. Suppose the mind is attached, mind goes again and again into, as you do it, having a cottage in Rishikesh, there could be in the next cottage a sadhu who has no FD, who has no, nothing, no security. But suppose he is doing Om Namah Shivaya and he has put one cloth that he has for drying outside. And he says, I hope it won't fly away, Om Namah Shivaya. I don't know whether I put 2 clips or just only 1 clip. The clip is, that plastic clip is not very strong. Yadi kapada ud jaye to Om Namah Shivaya. Well, I'll see and ensure, if the sadhu with the two cloths or a little, little money he has put it in a little cupboard and locked it and key under his deer skin. and says Om Namah Shivaya. Psychologically, you both are equal. Psychologically, you are equal. Physically, there are differences. And we are concerned with this. Why we are caught in thought? Why we don't do what needs to be done and then pay full attention to the next event, next interaction, next transaction? Lastly, in this awareness, by seeing limitations of thought, we arrive at a state of not doing. The state of not doing appears scary. What? We won't do anything, we just watch, we just see. We feel scary. But that is the secret. Do it and see. When there is no doing, see, I should clarify, I don't mean you stop doing a particular activity, not that one. But I am saying about that activity you are not doing anything. Suppose I go up the stage and my legs are trembling. Now, not that I stop speaking, I speak, or I sing, or whatever it is. But ordinarily in a spiritual context, in the sadhana context, or what you call self-development context, I think of doing something. Now here I don't do anything. If legs are trembling, and I am speaking with some tremor, some trembling, and I don't spend a single thought about how to stop this trembling. I only pay attention to the trembling. I only notice the shaking of the legs. Consider this possibility. Don't go to the extreme of not doing means stop. No. Think of the earlier example. You are driving, the engine is on, and you see why there is extra noise, or why there is spark there, and so on. So one is the transaction proper, one is the activity proper, one is the give and take proper. Right? One is this field of action, stimulus, response, and another is the issue of how to handle it. And in the matter of how to handle, having identified it as not very proper, things are not going well, my legs are trembling. So there is a judgment of thought. I shouldn't be trembling. Why am I trembling? Now what should I do? This is the expenditure of thought, I am saying. Can I only see the trembling of my legs without judging, this is bad, this is good? And if my mind judges by sheer habit, watch that judging. Watch that judging that your mind does out of sheer habit. And in this, you come out of limitations or the narrowness or the groove into which you are always stuck. In watching and not dissipating energy, dissipating thought, in what to do and all those, there is a spontaneous expansion with no boundary. And the whole of life, the whole of mind, the whole of what you see and what you say, what you perceive and what you respond, this whole thing, and with all its layers, is one then. You have not divided it. And in this one piece, one whole, being in awareness, there is a transformation that you don't bring about, but it happens. Shiva just opens his third eye and sees Kamadev. Kamadev turns to ashes. That is the Shiva's seeing, awareness, light, attention. In the flame of attention, Kamadev, lust, greed, jealousy, whatever goes away. That's the illustration. Elsewhere there is another Puranic episode. Kali, after killing asuras, demons, is in such fury. Now people are afraid she would kill devatas also and everybody. They request Shiva to handle the situation. And all Shiva does is goes and lies down as a roadblock. And Kali, with a sword in her hand stained with blood, is rushing. And whoever comes, if Narada comes, his head is gone. Of course, Narada is very clever. He has balcony seat always. So he is watching it all from the balcony. Kya ho raha hai? And Kali rushes and she steps on Shiva's chest. You have pictures of, Kali with a foot upon Shiva's chest. This is the Sat Tattva. Mind, which is a Shakti, a power, comes in touch with Sat. Sat is the steady substrate, Adhishtanam. When the mind comes in touch with Sat Tattva, the mind calms. Kali calms down there. Now, the Shiva doesn't do anything. He illustrates Chit Tattva, seeing, tonight stopping, in burning Kamadev with only seeing. No mantra, no tantra, no weapon. He doesn't take Trishul, etc. He illustrates the Sat Tattva by allowing Kali to step on his chest. And then she comes down. And he illustrates Ananda Tattva by his general, Shiva's general album photo in meditation. He has this bliss which is uncaused. Uncaused happiness, natural happiness. He is in his natural happiness. Sat, Chit and Ananda. To indulge in examples and enjoy them and to go into the language and the art, and that is an exercise of thought. But take the example and just be aware. Be aware with no intervention of thought about how to handle. Let there be thoughts about the activity. That's called functional thinking. If you are greeting your daughter on her birthday, happy birthday to you, say it, and emotions rise. Don't say, oh my God, why are emotions coming? No, emotions are natural. All that is. But these thoughts, last one more time I'll clarify. Sometimes you are clear, but I am not satisfied. That's my problem. When I greet my daughter and say, happy birthday to you, and so on, emotions rising is perfectly all right. But suppose I have thoughts, I shouldn't be. After all this Vedanta, I am so emotional today. That's a terrible thing. That's the culprit. So can you think of the second level thoughts and how to control it and so on? Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, honey, dear, happy birthday to you. And then say to your wife, I became so emotional today. As though it is wrong or as though it is right. The judging. The judging part, is a questionable intervention. Find out for yourself what it does through attention. Awareness is distinct from thought. Thought is rooted in various memories and images. Thoughts have past and future. Thoughts have cause and effect. Thoughts have a certain structure, thinker, the thought, and levels and hierarchy. Awareness is that observation, that attentiveness in which the entirety of thought, or thoughts if you want plural, the entirety of the whole network of thoughts becomes visible, becomes apparent. Unlike when we are an analyst or when we are a thinker, however smart or clever we may be, As we are analysts or thinkers, we are in a part and we see another part. It is a part versus part. In awareness, in true attention, it is the whole of the mind sitting lightly in something by far subtler than thought itself. So we continue on this itself, in fact, and it will be not at all a departure to some other theme when we take up tomorrow, peace and freedom. Namaste, good night.